Well, Isaiah 21 is another revelation that's given. This one, as it says in verse 1, is the burden of the desert of the sea. This is not a revelation to people, but more of to a section of the planet, of the earth, basically. So we're going to learn some interesting lessons in here that, again, literally fulfilled and happened in the old days, but is metaphorically or spiritually something for us to understand for the last days as well. So verse 1, the burden of the desert of the sea. As whirlwinds in the south pass through, so it cometh from the desert, from a terrible land. Now think about this, okay? This is a prophecy about a desert area that is covered by the sea. Could be flooding, inundation maybe, could be something there. Some people might say this is the Negev desert, so a possible area that has this. Could be that the desert, because of the sand dunes, kind of looks like a sea type of idea, some metaphorical things there. In the Bible commentary by Keil and Delitzsch, they say that they believe it alluded to Babylon, is what they're saying here, that the city sat on a hot and dusty plain in the Euphrates Valley, but anciently, before flood control dams were built, the whole plain was flooded each spring during the high water runoff of the Euphrates. Thus Babylon sat both in a desert and on a sea. This interpretation seems to be supported by Jeremiah's description of Babylon as she that dwellest upon many waters, and this promise that her waters would be dried up. Spiritually or symbolically, John described Babylon as sitting upon many waters. He then explained that the waters represent the nations and peoples of the earth. See Revelation 17. If Isaiah used the same concept, then the sea would represent Babylon's dominion and the desert, the coming loss of those dominions. So it went from being a great bounteous place to not worth anything, to being destroyed. So verse 2, a grievous vision is declared unto me. The treacherous dealer dealeth treacherously, and the spoiler spoileth. Go up, O Elam, besiege, O Media. All the sighing thereof have I made to cease. So Elam, actually, this is really interesting because, again, we're talking about Babylon. Babylon is a small nation that's a part of the greater Assyrian nation at the time that this was written in Isaiah's time. But this, Elam, is where Cyrus the Great comes from, who is the king of Persia, the Medes that are neighbors to Babylon that end up taking over Babylon. So this is the destruction of Babylon, literally, but also the destruction of the wicked of the world, basically also. So verse 3, therefore are my loins filled with pain. Pangs have taken hold upon me as the pangs of a woman that travaileth. I was bowed down at the hearing of it. I was dismayed at the seeing of it. So this is Isaiah saying that he's astonished at the destruction, the problems that are going to be having, basically. Again, Keil and Delitzsch had some commentary on this. It's interesting. They said, let's see, Chalkala is the contortion produced by cramp, as in Nahum 2. Tizerim is the word properly applied to the pains of childbirth. Na'ava means to bend or bow oneself and is also used to denote a convulsive utterance of pain. Ta'ah, which is used in a different sense from Psalms, denotes a feverish and irregular beating of the pulse. The darkness of evening and night, which the prophet loved so much, chesek, a desire arising from inclination, and always longed for, either that he might give himself up to contemplation or that he might rest from outward and inward labor, had been changed into quaking by the terrible vision. So Isaiah is even just having a hard time even taking in what he's seeing. It's so crazy how bad the destruction is going to be. Now, if we think about this from if we look at this, they're going to fall apart quickly, basically. It's going to be bad. The destruction is going to be bad. Babylon fell pretty much overnight. I mean, it was so swift. It was crazy. So kind of like they're talking about like a flood or a storm from a tornado is just going to hit and go bad fast, basically. In fact, the people are going to be amazed at how bad it is. Isaiah is amazed at how bad it is. Like, holy crap, that happened quick. The destruction of the people is so bad. if you think about it, really, he's trying to encourage Israel to stay put, to, come back to Israel for safety, kind of an idea. Verse 4, my heart panted, fearfulness affrighted me. The night of my pleasure hath he turned into fear unto me. So again, this is what they talked about. He likes to contemplate. Isaiah likes to go out in the night, in the darkness, so that he can focus himself and pray to God and contemplate things and work things out. This vision has disrupted his night. He's not going to be able to sleep. His heart panted. So he's got more than just labor pains. He is bowed down. So he used, like Keil and Delitzsch talked about, there's 3 different words they use for like these kinds of pains. Isaiah put all 3 of them in here. He's bowed over with pain. He's crouching. He's so distraught from all this. It's ruined his whole night, basically. His heart is racing. He's got an irregular heartbeat. He's got problems because of the anxiety and the troubles he's seeing. So verse 5, prepare the table, watch in the watchtower, eat, drink. Arise, ye princes, and anoint the shield. Really interesting stuff here. So the people, if you think about it, prepare the table. They're eating and drinking. They're feasting, having festivities. Watch in the watchtower. Somebody's up watching in case there's a problem, an enemy coming, basically. But here's the problem. They are not going to pay attention to the watchman. We're going to hear this in verse 6. It says, for thus hath the Lord said unto me, go set a watchman. Let him declare what he seeth. So the watchman goes up to the tower and is going to tell everybody what he sees. But are the people going to hear because of their feasting? They're going to be laughing and enjoying things and have wine. So they're going to be drunk. They are not going to pay attention to the watchman in the tower. So a really great metaphor of how wickedness comes about. You avoid and ignore the watchman in the tower, which is a prophet of God. You ignore the prophet's teachings and you follow what everybody else is doing, which is partying, having a grand, fun, super great time, not realizing there is trouble coming, but you're not listening to the watchman. So good symbolism here of wickedness, how that works out. Now, verse 7, and he saw, so this is the watchman, he saw a chariot with a couple of horsemen, a chariot of asses and a chariot of camels, and he hearkened diligently with much heed. So Keil and Delitzsch says about this, they say the description of the many asses and camels and horsemen seems to refer to the physical trappings of the Persian army. The animals provided useful carriage for food and implements of war, but were also effectively used by the Persians to throw the enemy into confusion. Now, if you saw horses on chariots, you knew there was an army coming. If you saw donkeys and camels with chariots, you're going, what the heck is going on? I'm not sure what's happening, so it was a bit of a sneak attack. So the watchmen are watching, here's what's going to happen, but the people are partying and aren't paying attention. And it's going to go bad for them, basically. In fact, verse 8, and he cried, a lion, my lord, I stand continually upon the watchtower in the daytime, and I am set in my ward whole nights. And behold, here cometh a chariot of men with a couple of horsemen, and he answered and said, Babylon is fallen, and all the graven images of her gods he hath broken to the ground. And I'm going to pause there for just a second. So the watchman sees the oncoming army, but no one's paying attention to him. Now this is really interesting because this is, if you look at the stories of King Darius, when he actually took over Babylon, that they snuck into the town and then destroyed everybody from the inside. But again, if you were paying attention, maybe you would have seen him coming. But that night was the night we're going to read about in the book of Daniel, when Belteshazzar, the son of Nebuchadnezzar, was partying. He was drinking wine, getting drunk out of the temple goblets. That's when he saw the finger of the Lord on the wall writing. So literally that happened, basically. So figuratively, the wicked world is not going to understand when the wickedness is going to go down. They're not going to be paying attention. They're not going to be thinking of it. They're going to be focusing on the party, the play, the fun that they're having now, and ignoring everything else. And they're distracted by what's happening now and not realizing the greater scheme of things. And they're going to be caught off guard. That's the problem they're going to have. So verse 9, as we get in here, again, the watchman is warning him. Okay? There's a warning going out. Are we paying attention to it for us? Are we listening to the watchman in the tower? Are we following what the prophet of God is telling us? Like Isaiah, this would be President Nelson at the time of this recording. Are we paying attention to what warnings they are giving? Not just President Nelson, but all the apostles. What are they teaching? What are they telling us? What's the message they're getting across? Are we really listening to what they're telling us? And are we listening to what they're not saying? Sometimes they can't be too direct. Sometimes they have to be indirect or imply things. So watch for what is going on. What are they saying, what they don't say, what's being implied. Now, what's really interesting about this is talking about, again, the last days, the end of the wickedness, destruction of the wicked. If we go back to Isaiah 14, we learn more about this, the gathering and the wickedness and destruction. And Jared Halverson even says Revelations 18 is corresponding to this chapter of Isaiah 21. Doctrine and Covenants 133, getting into this idea of the last days, the destruction of the wicked. It's going to happen and they're not even going to see it coming. Basically, those who are listening to the watchman will know when to flee. But again, it's not us looking for the signs. It is us watching the watchman who is looking for the signs. If the watchman is the prophet of God, then you'll probably go in a good direction. If not, you might want to be careful with that. And now let's continue on here, verse 10. O my threshing and the corn of my floor, that which I have heard the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, have I declared unto you. So this, in Hebrew, you could look at this translation and say, O my threshing one and son of my threshing floor. So the prophet thus addressed the Israelites who will survive Babylon's downfall. So the threshing floor is where the separation of the wheat and the tares happens. You take your wheat and you beat it, you hit it, and it breaks it up, and then you toss it in the air. The wheat kernels drop down because they're heavy. The tares are light because they're not real seed, like they don't have the bulk of a wheat berry. They will be pushed to the side by the wind. And that is how you separate the wheat and the tares. Basically, so you've got to let them mature, then you beat them to separate them all out, then you throw them up into the air, so tumultuousness, and then the wind will push the wicked away and the righteous will come right back down to God. So challenges and trials are there to test us to see, are we willing to survive that threshing and still follow God, still do what he has asked of us, basically. Verse 11 now, the burden of Duma. He called to me out of Seir, watchman, what of the night? Watchman, what of the night? So he's asking basically what's going on. And he's saying not just what of the night, but when is it going to end? When is this destruction going to end? When is the invading army going to stop coming upon us? They're just coming over the wall. They're just coming at us. When is all this going to stop? Verse 12, the watchman said, the morning cometh, and also the night. If ye will inquire ye, return come. Now that's interesting. They kind of switch that return come, kind of forward, backwards type of motion. So this is at the end of Babylonian captivity approaches, but another oppressor follows. Inquire again later is kind of what he's saying basically. Yes, you'll have a reprieve, but there's going to be another destruction coming. Come back and talk to me later. So in here, in that verse 12, pay attention and follow the watchman or the prophet is the key of this. Repent and be ready to leave the wickedness of the world. So this gets into these thoughts and ideas of Sherry Dew has a great book called Prophets Can See Around Corners. That is a really handy book for us to understand. That's why they're a watchman. They can see what's coming. Now, President Nelson has told us in recent General Conference addresses that in the coming days we will see some of the greatest miracles of God he has ever done. If you look in the scriptures as we are, when does God do his most greatest miracles? When there's great destruction. We've got some stuff coming. President Nelson is warning us. What are the other messages that you gather from listening to General Conference, reading their talks, understanding what they want us to know, how to help study and things? What are the things that you're learning from President Nelson and the other apostles that helps you to go, oh, I think this is something they want us to work on or do? Things to avoid as well as things to do. Omission and commission. So I'm looking forward to reading some of those in the comment section. So verse 13, here's another prophecy. The burden upon Arabia is what this one is basically. In the forest in Arabia shall ye lodge, O ye traveling companions of Dedanim. The inhabitants of the land of Tema brought water to him that was thirsty. They prevented with their bread him that fled. For they fled from the swords, from the drawn sword, from the bent bow, and from the grievousness of war. For thus hath the Lord said unto me, within a year, according to the years of an hireling, and all the glory of Kedar shall fail. So this is what's going to happen. So Arabian caravans and camps would suffer disruption and oppression by the Babylonian conquest as well, basically. So Arabia is not going to escape from Babylon. It's going to have a lot of problems, a lot of destructions, and people that are going to not want to fight are going to have to flee the land, basically, to get out of there. So verse 16, for thus hath the Lord said unto me, within a year, I read that one, shall the glory of Kedar shall fall, and the residue of the number of archers, the mighty men of the children of Kedar, shall be diminished, for the Lord God of Israel hath spoken it. So a lot of destruction, a lot of problems coming. Again, this is a fascinating time of history to study as Babylon moved across Assyria. Now, it hasn't happened yet. Isaiah wasn't around when Babylon took over. Isaiah was around when Assyria took over and was dominant. So this is still future stuff. So Babylon will rise up and destroy Assyria faster and more destructive than Assyria destroyed the other kingdoms. And so there's a ratcheting up of violence and challenges. And if you look at it, Assyria, fell apart in like 3 years. Like it didn't take long. It just took them like decades to build out to where they were. And in 3 years was limited down to Nineveh, their main capital. And there was one other town near the coast from there. And that was it. That was all they had. They got shrunk down, and Babylon took over. And then the Medes and the Persians partnered with Babylon to allow that to happen. But then Babylon took over and did their own thing, and the Persians finally later said, fine, we're going to take it over. And then they took over Babylon, basically. So some crazy times, a lot of good metaphor for us to understand the wicked, it's just not going to work out. It's not going to work out in the last days. So being righteous, keeping God's commandments, doing what he has asked us to do is what's the important thing for us. So let's jump over to the next chapter to continue on in understanding the book of Isaiah.